Hi, Rabbi. No, long time no see.
It's been a few hours, right?
Yeah.
There we are. That goes over there. That comes over here. All right. Just about got all of the different bits where I need them. Hope everyone is doing well. 6:02. I think we're just about ready to go ahead and start. Don't want to reward people for coming late. Okay, so let's go ahead and get down to business. So tonight we are going to take a shift. We've talked the last couple of weeks about Shabbat. Shabbat is often used as a reminder about our relationship with God, and in particular, our connection to God, almost as though we were a married couple. And such, I thought it might be nice if we examine how married couples actually work in Judaism. There are quite a lot of guidelines, and especially about how the marriage itself works, and when things aren't working, how divorce works. And so we're going to look at both sides. Now, I know that some people in the past have asked me, well, Rabbi, why are we talking about divorce at the same time as weddings? And I want to go ahead and address that as we start. So for weddings to be fully meaningful, for the marriage to be fully meaningful, there needs to be an understanding that this is a willing decision. Judaism does not believe in forced marriages. It doesn't believe that there should be a time for people to be forced into a marriage. It also doesn't believe there is any reason to force people to remain in a marriage. If the marriage is having trouble, of course, we recommend counseling and working together. And I'm happy to help with people getting some direction on that, although I'm not a professional marriage counselor. I can sometimes provide helpful insights in short-term solutions. But eventually, there are some situations and some relationships that are better dissolved without recrimination, without anger, without any form of pettiness or bitterness. And Judaism does provide an opportunity for people to end the relationship and then be able to find, hopefully, a more satisfying one. So although we don't take divorce lightly, it is a very important component because otherwise everything that happens in the wedding under the chuppah, as we say, would basically be a life sentence. And that's simply not the way the life works. Now, even more obviously, the Torah mentions divorce. So removing it from our religion would be rather problematic, given that we follow the Torah. But since some people are just curious about the juxtaposition in one class, I wanted to get that cleared up as we start. So to talk about weddings, we have to figure out, how did people get married in the old day? So we're going to go back in time and do the old, Scooby-Doo, fade into the back. And we look at the description of marriages in the ancient world by the Mishnah Torah, by Rambam's description. Before the giving of the Torah, it would be that if a man happened upon a woman in the marketplace and they wanted to marry each other, he would bring her into his house and consummate the marriage between them privately, and she would be his wife. Essentially saying, two people meet, they both say, do you wanna? They say, sure, they go home, they have sex, they're married. That was the old days, prior to the Torah being given. Once the Torah was given, Israel was commanded that if a man wanted to marry a woman, he would acquire her first through witnesses, and afterwards she would be his wife. As it says, when a man takes a woman and sleeps with her, Deuteronomy 22. So what Rambam is trying to lay out for us as he summarizes much of our tradition about this topic is that while indeed the nexus of being married is that two people will be living together and being intimate, and indeed that would have been sufficient in earlier stages of life, that it was a gift through the Torah that we would take that act and take that commitment and make it not only a more formal and fancy affair, although Jewish weddings don't have to be crazy fancy, but that it would also be a public affair, that there would be witnesses, that we want to make sure that people know that these two people have committed to one another, that these two people are now not committed to other people that they are not married to. And that is an important consideration for the community. Although the community does not have the permission to force people not to get married, it does still have a vested interest in knowing who is getting married, and even more so supporting and celebrating when they get married. So we have been blessed by the Torah to say that there are better ways to achieve this goal. So what do we do nowadays? Well, nowadays, there are two main sections to a wedding. There's Erusin, which is also called Kiddushin, and Nisuin. Now, they used to be separate events, meaning that in the old days, when you read through in the Mishnah and the Talmud, you'll hear about somebody doing the first half, Erusin, and then coming back a year later to finalize the marriage in the final ceremonies of Nisuin. This gave a chance for people to prepare for being married. Both the man as well as the wife would be doing what they needed to in their year preparation, whether it be preparing the house or preparing to live in someone else's house. As in those days, women would move from her family into his family's estate. That was something that also needed to be prepared for. Nowadays, we don't do that. Nowadays, both Erusin and Nisuin are done back to back with only a few moments in between them under the chuppah, the wedding canopy, right at the same event. And that is because we have learned over time that delaying between Erusin and Nisuin can be problematic. Internally, it can be problematic because once you have gone through Erusin, the first part of the wedding ceremony, you are basically married with all the responsibilities-ish, but none of the privileges. Meaning that if somebody goes to Erusin and then they sleep with someone other than their betrothed, that is considered full-fledged adultery in the mind of Judaism. And, well, a year is a long time for people to wait. And making sure that adultery was not becoming more common just because of this delay custom, well, it makes sense to go ahead and finish off the relationship with Nisuin and allow it to be finalized. It is certainly harder to be cheating on your spouse when you actually live together. Still not impossible, unfortunately, since many people do, but it definitely is easier than if you're living in different parts of the city or sometimes even in different cities. Externally, we also learned that many people might be widowed during this time or made widowers. That is to say, a person might become engaged, betrothed through Erusin, and then there would be a war, a famine, a disease, some other problem, and their betrothed would be gone, whether they would be killed or die from a disease or starvation, or as sometimes would happen, being taken captive. And the implications of the betrothed being taken captive are the same as if it was the married couple. And if you go back and read through the last couple chapters of Yevamot in Mishnah, which we just finished yesterday, you'll know that that is a really, really bad situation to be stuck in. So it was found over the years that putting Erusin and Nisuin together prevented a lot of those other types of problems. So it just made a lot more sense, and that is the way we do it. Don't worry, just because we have two ceremonies doesn't make the ceremony that long. Also, as part of our modern wedding ceremony, we have the Ketubah. Now, the Ketubah is presented before the ceremony begins, and it is accepted by witnesses, accepted in front of witnesses. And the Ketubah is essentially a promissory note that ensures financial support for the bride should the couple divorce or the husband die. Remember that in the ancient world, most of the financial wealth was locked up in land, and most of the land was in the perpetual ownership of the family lineage. and the family lineage was established through the male line. This meant that most women were in need of support from the money that was generated by the land from a man. That was simply part of their economics. That is not codified as being the best way or the right way. It simply is what was happening in this part of the world for a couple thousand years. The rabbis noticed this and said, if I were a woman, I'm not sure I'd want to get married, because getting married means you leave your family, your father, your brothers, your uncles, the other men who would have owned the family estate, and you're going off to your husband's estate. And if he decides to kick you out, it may be hard for you to get home to get back to that security. So maybe just stay where you are, and that way at least you'll have the security and not have to worry about what's going to happen in the new relationship. So the rabbi said, we need to do a little adjusting here. We need to do what's officially called a tikkun olam, a modification to society to try and balance out the risk reward that is at stake here. So tell you what, every time someone gets married, the woman is going to receive a promissory note, a debt document from the husband that says, if I die or if I divorce, I will pay you this amount. And they had a certain minimum amount that would be expected, which would be enough for the woman to have a reasonable life, not fancy, but of course it could be negotiated in the ancient world to be more and more, depending upon the needs of the family or the desire to show additional generosity. And this was a financial document that came at the top of the list of debts. So if the husband dies and there are many debtors, the wife collects first before any of the other creditors. And likewise, when being divorced, his assets can be seized in order to pay this, as it is a primary obligation that he has. So the Ketubah is not usually used to settle divorce issues in the modern world or inheritance. We allow the civil law to take care of that, but it is still a very important statement of trying to equalize the relationship when the bride and groom are stepping into this situation together, and saying that there will be protection should something go wrong one way or another. Just a quick pause in case anybody has a question on that point.
Yes, Rob, I have a question.
Yes, Jose.
In all different branches of the Judaism, still the same position about the Erusin, doing the same day of the wedding?
So it is the normal procedure. There are some exceptional issues where there might be the need to do Erusin first and then Nisuin later. I did have one colleague that needed to do Erusin first for personal reasons, and then had to delay Nisuin for a number of months. But it was exceptional for that to happen. So it's not impossible. It's not forbidden at all. It's not prohibited. But it is not the normal system in any of the communities anymore. An important distinction: many people have adopted the modern American and European style of proposal and engagement. That doesn't count as erusin in Jewish law. That's nice. You're welcome to do it. There's nothing wrong with it. If you want to do an engagement, system, down on one knee or whatever, sure, no problem. But it has no standing under legal law. For it to be a legally binding Jewish engagement, what we call erusin, or I like to call it the super engagement, then that has to be done according to the rules that we'll explain in just a minute. Onward.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. So before you head to the chuppah, before you head to the wedding canopy, we have a ceremony called the Bedeckin. Now, the Bedeckin is where the groom will lower the veil over his bride. Now, I know that in many Western European countries, there's all sorts of superstitions. The groom shouldn't see the bride before the ceremony. And a lot of people have this rather quaint, I guess, romantic notion that the groom is supposed to be stunned and surprised when the bride comes down the aisle and go, oh, and all of that. That's nice. Trust me, as Jews, we are romantic. We've got an entire love poem as one of the books of our Bible. But we also know that when you're getting married, you should know who you're marrying. And as I mentioned, we already have the Ketubah, which is in a way knowing that the person is committing to be there for you. And likewise, the groom should be looking at the actual person that he's marrying face to face, not looking at the beautiful gown and veil and flowers and everything else. So before the ceremony begins, there is this moment where the groom will lower the veil to do the Bedeckin and then be able to marry her under the chuppah shortly afterwards. Now, historically, this actually has a very famous story where we know that Jacob, got married to Leah by accident. And the only way that can happen is if Jacob never actually saw her face during the wedding. And well, we've learned from that. And so we make sure that we're looking at the right person before we actually get married to them so that we don't end up with a mistaken bride again. Again, if you're interested in the Mishnah during Yevamot, we had a number of times where we talked about what happens if you get married to someone, but you're not sure who. It can happen. It's stupid and people shouldn't. But this is one way to try and avoid that type of accident. Another thing you may have seen either in movies or read about is circling. As the groom approaches the chuppah, the wedding canopy under which the ceremony is conducted, it is customary in some communities for the bride to circle the groom. Now, many communities do this 7 times. And the exact origin of this tradition and its meaning are a little unclear. Some interpret it as being she is leaving her father's home and coming into his sphere, almost literally orbiting him. Others see it as a step to ward off evil spirits, that any bad spirits that were following her will be thrown off the scent as she goes round and round. Really, there aren't a lot of good reasons why this tradition might have begun or for continuing it. It is definitely not obligatory unless you find it spiritually meaningful for you and your beloved, or if it is very important to your community and your family, in which case I would recommend listening to why it's important to them. Now, different texts have been used to support this. Nothing really works that well, as Jeremiah 31, where the woman is said, or a woman encompasses and protects a man. Hosea 2, which mentions 3 references to betrothal in the Battle of Jericho. In the Battle of Jericho, Joshua circled the city 7 times. But like I said, this is a custom without firm origin. It is a tradition without firm meaning and symbolism. And therefore, you are welcome to keep it, to repurpose it, and have it mean what you want to mean for yourself. And you're also welcome to leave it off. I will say as a personal note, there was no circling at my wedding. And then we get to the part that is actually more important under the chuppah. So far, the Ketubah was legally important, and the erusin is legally important. If somebody forgot the Bedeckin, if someone forgot the circling, the wedding is still a wedding. We haven't failed to bring these people together. But erusin, now we're back into legally required actions. So erusin, or kiddushin as it is sometimes called, is the formal betrothal symbolized by the man offering a token of worth and the woman's acceptance. This act binds the two together such that they would need a divorce to separate, and, as I mentioned earlier, introduces liability for adultery. It does not allow them to be together in intimate ways as husband and wife, though, and can be thought of as a super engagement. So this is the act where the ring is offered and accepted. And the statement of I do's and do you take so-and-so, that is a perfectly fine custom if somebody would like to add it to their wedding ceremony, but it is not needed within the wedding ceremony. During this time, we do a special blessing. And as this is a moment of celebration, just like our holidays, we do the blessing over a cup of wine. And the blessing is as follows. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us with your commandments and given us commandments concerning forbidden relations, and has forbidden unto us those who are merely betrothed, and permitted to us those lawfully married to us through chuppah and kiddushin. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who sanctifies your people Israel through chuppah and kiddushin. So a lot going on here. The blessing is thanking God for the commandments, as is common whenever we are fulfilling a commandment, but it is thanking us specifically for letting us know that there are some people we don't marry. No matter how much you love her, you don't marry your sister, for example. And for also telling us that when we are married, that the intimacy, the relationships, the connection that we have to that person is absolutely allowed and approved of. Judaism does not have any shame or guilt associated with intimacy between two loving partners within a married relationship. They should be happy and wonderful and fulfill each other. There's absolutely nothing to be ashamed of that. And it is something that we celebrate, and we will come back and celebrate that again later on in our ceremony. So this is telling us that we are should be grateful for the way God has created this and guided us. And it's also reminding us that just because you have done this part of the ceremony doesn't mean you're actually allowed to do that yet. So this person is permitted to you to get married to, but not permitted to you to take to bed. And we then remind ourselves that this whole process, this guidance, these instructions are sanctifying us. They make us holy through the chuppah and the kiddushin. And as part of this, as I mentioned, we have the presentation of a token. Now, the usual form of token in the modern world, and has been the form of token for about 2,000 years, is a ring. That is a pretty long tradition that we've had. And this ring is the act of betrothal. Now, this does not mean that you are, quote, buying a wife. Many people make the mistaken assumption that because an object of worth is being handed over, that there is somehow a purchase to the bride. That is not at all what is happening. First of all, if a person were purchasing the bride, they wouldn't be giving it to her. They'd be giving it to her owner. There is no owner of anyone, so therefore it doesn't make sense. And the ring, of course, is given to the woman, and the woman is allowed to say no. As you can see on the page, the ring itself cannot contain any stones, no diamonds, emeralds, rubies. This is so the bride will not be tempted by a mistaken estimation of the value. Most of us aren't experts at evaluating the worth of a ring. And the ring itself has to also be worth at least a pruta. A pruta is the Aramaic word for basically a penny, meaning it has to be worth at least something, not just a piece of trash. So you can't get married with a cigar band, a band made out of a blade of grass. It does have to have some value, but it can be the most minimal value that is possible. Now, why is all of this there? Because the bride, just like the groom, should know who she is marrying. Just as the groom should not be taken in by the fancy hairdo, dress, veil, flowers, etc., the bride should not be taken in by a flashing, shiny, bling rock. The bride should be marrying the man, not the cash, not the jewelry. And this limitation is there to make sure that she is clear about exactly who she is marrying, and, to be fair, what he is worth, because the economic stability of him and his household will be of very important, of great importance to her once they leave the chuppah. So there does need to be an honest appraisal of what is to come. That doesn't mean you should only marry a rich man. Far from it. As you can see, even if all he is offering is a penny's worth of something, if that is understood and accepted, then that is wonderful. May you have a wonderful, happy, loving life together. It just needs to be clear that everybody's on the same page. Judaism is adamant that when people get married, they're actually getting married to people that they know and understand and have the proper expectations. Because when they don't, well, that is a problem. Now, just a little bit more about getting married and why we're using a ring. Well, as Rambam said way back at the beginning, the giving of a ring or other monetary gift is only one of 3 ways to initiate betrothal. The second is with a document that states the same as the groom will say, behold, you are consecrated to me, etc., etc. The third way, and this is not the Ketubah, by the way, this is a separate document that he writes out that just has these words on it. Again, if she's willing to accept it, then they can be married. And the last, well, that is explicitly, the third is the intercourse which the couple had, which also goes along with the phrase of behold, you are consecrated to me. And again, there needs to be willingness and acceptance on both sides. Judaism is adamant that you cannot take a woman by force and then claim that she is your wife. And this last one, in any case, was explicitly ruled out of the sages as being really not the appropriate way for people to get married. The best way to get married is with this clear statement, understanding, and gift that comes at the beginning. Questions on these points before I get to one more modern twist on this issue?
Rabbi, I got another question.
Please.
Why the bride wear the rings on the index finger?
It is customary in Jewish weddings, but only customary, not by law, that when the ring is first being given, that it go on the index finger, right? The pointer finger. Now, it can then be transferred over to the more traditional ring finger if that is wished, and you should size accordingly. The custom originated with the idea of essentially Jewish, what would be the right term? Internal lines of energy, with the idea being that the index finger of the right hand is directly connected to the heart, with the notion that by putting it there, you are showing a connection between action, which is what the hand symbolizes in Jewish life, and the heart, which is direction, the internal feelings. It's not only emotion, it is both intellect and emotion together in Jewish expression and poetry. The idea of head and heart being separate is a very Western concept and not native to Judaism. And so the idea of putting it on the index finger was you are linking action to the internal person in every way. Both the outside and inside are being linked together, and both are needed for a good relationship. You don't only marry the shell of a person, and you also don't only marry the interior of a person. You need both to be a full person, and you need to be happy, comfortable, and accepting of both to be in a happy relationship. Good? Okay.
I do have a question really quick, sorry.
Yes,
do you still, well, I don't want to say do you still, is it something that you see happen often? Or has it become more westernized in your experience that women will wear it on their left hand? On their left ring finger, sorry.
Right. So as you can see, well, maybe not because of Zoom, it's on my left hand as well.
Okay.
But under the chuppah, it went on my right finger and then transferred over to my left hand for the keeping of this particular custom. And so if I'm conducting a wedding, I will usually instruct the family to follow the custom of going to the right finger and then transferring. And I even practice with the bride and groom of, taking it from one, boom, boom, of how to move it over. I've got it all worked out to make sure that happens. If it was put onto the ring finger directly on the left hand, that's fine. You haven't done anything wrong. You've missed an opportunity for a beautiful idea and a beautiful custom, but you're still married. It doesn't cancel out the validity of the marriage.
Do you find it common for women to regularly wear it on their index finger on the right hand though?
No. It's most women will keep it on their ring finger, and with good reason. The ring finger is more protected and not used as much. When you wear a ring finger, I don't know if you're somebody who wears lots of rings from time to time, but rings on the index finger, especially of your dominant hand, are really a pain. They get in the way of everything. So having it on the non-dominant hand and having it be on one of the inner fingers makes a lot of sense.
Okay, thank you.
But that's just a practical matter. If somebody wanted to wear it on the index finger, that's perfectly fine. And technically, you don't have to wear the ring ever again. So this is actually also an important concept because it can be a matter of contention in some families. You have a certain tradition. The ring that you use to get married does not have to be the ring that you wear day in, day out. Some people may have a particular stone or ring that is of special emotional connection to their family, and it might not be suitable for the wedding ring under the chuppah. And so what I will counsel the family to do is to get a token ring, a simple band of gold or silver or anything really, use that under the chuppah, and then replace it with the other ring that has some other significance for the family. And that way, both Jewish law and the family needs can be met. And it's even possible once the first ring has been put on and this part of the ceremony is done, for the other ring to still play a role in the ceremony. It's just not this role. Now, on the question of nowadays, we have a question of, does the groom get a ring? And the short answer is yes, but we have to be careful, right? When we give the ring, in order for it to be clear that it is for marriage and not just a gift, the groom has to make a special declaration, right? This is not just a, hey, I like you, have a ring. This has the significance of being a marriage token. And he has to say, behold, you are consecrated to me with this ring according to the law of Moses and Israel. And we do this both in Hebrew as well as English. And that is the marriage declaration. This is the I do sentence that is said during the ceremony. And the bride accepts it. However, historically, the bride didn't give him anything at the same time, nor did she make a public declaration. Now, the reason for that historically was that oftentimes the bride didn't have anything to give. Again, the economics of the ancient world were firmly in the hand only of the men in most situations. And it also could make it look like by her giving him something that they were making a transaction. You know, I give you an apple, you give me a peach. That means that I didn't actually give you the apple. I bought the peach with my apple. And to avoid that, the bride wouldn't do anything. Now, in the modern world, where most brides and most grooms want both of them to receive a ring, to be able to make a declaration of their commitment, and to have that significance memory for their married life, they'd like for something for the bride to do. And so, what you can do is do the gift from the bride to the groom. And I do a little preamble, and I explain that this is not tit for tat, that she is not paying for the ring that was just given. This is her own decision of her own will and her own ring, and it's just a gift. And that way we make sure that everybody in attendance is very clear. She's not buying the ring he just gave her by giving him a ring. This is her own independent, completely separate act, and there is a variety of things that she can say. He is limited to one sentence that he has to say. More is certainly possible, and it's nothing wrong with couples writing their own vows in addition to the line that's on this page. But for her, because it's not a legally binding part of the wedding ceremony, there are a number of different verses from the Tanakh, from the Bible, or additional phrases that she can say when making her own presentation. And that's something that I customize with each couple. All right. And then that would have been the time to go home and spend a year getting ready for being married. Nowadays, however, we shoot on to the next part of the ceremony, known as nisuin. And this comes next. However, to make a distinction between the first half and this half, it's often the custom to read the Ketubah or parts of the Ketubah just as a formal declaration, a public statement, since the signing of the Ketubah is often done privately, and also to kill a little time so that everybody understands that the first ceremony has ended and the second ceremony is about to begin. Now, Nisuin itself, the actual legal component of it, is the recitation of the Sheva Brachot, the 7 blessings. Lots of additional readings and songs can be added, and it's the custom of many communities to do many different additional parts to this section. But ultimately, Nisuin is marked by the 7 blessings, the Sheva Brachot, and that alone. Everything else is window dressing and wonderful sentiment, but not required. So, and the Sheva Brachot, these 7 blessings, can be recited by the officiant, or they can be given as honors to the guest. Now, what are these blessings? Well, again, we are celebrating, and therefore we have wine. Remember that this may look weird having another cup of wine when we just had one a few minutes ago, but remember, originally this would have been with a year in between, so having a second cup of wine after a year would have made a little bit more sense in context. And since it is part of the ceremony, we get 2 cups. So we thank God for creating the fruit of the vine. We use the same opening, the blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe. And then we say, who created everything for his glory. Kind of interesting, where's that going? We thank God who is the creator of humanity. We're talking about the human condition. God created the world. God created us in the world. God created us, meaning humanity, in his image. The term man there, I should probably update the translation, is the word for human. Creating humanity in God's image, in the pattern of his own likeness, and provided for the perpetuation of his kind. You are blessed, Lord, the creator of man. Number 4 there often gets misunderstood. It's not talking about us looking like God. It is talking about us acting like God. How are we acting like God? We get to create new human beings. That's kind of amazing that we have the capacity to actually create another person. And that is a little bit like being God. Don't get a swollen head, but it is something that is a special thing and something that we shouldn't take for granted. There are plenty of things that live in this world that don't get to have that experience. And even the other species that have that experience don't quite understand it to the same level that we do. And our level of understanding is one of God's great blessings. Number 5, we begin to sort of change theme a little bit. Let the barren city, which is usually a euphemism for Jerusalem, be jubilantly happy and joyful at her joyous reunion with her children. Blessed are you, Lord, who makes Zion rejoice with her children. The idea here is that all of Israel, meaning all the Jewish people everywhere, are celebrating this union of these 2 people. These are the children of Israel, the children of the Jewish people coming together to continue as a people, as a nation, and through their own specific love, the love that exists among us all. And then blessing number 6, let the loving couple be very happy, just as you made your creation happy in the Garden of Eden so long ago. Again, should they be blessed? They should be blessed the same way that Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, were blessed at the beginning in that first union. Blessed are you, Lord, who makes the bridegroom and the bride happy. We're going to come back to that tagline when we get to the bottom. Number 7, again, the same opening. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who created joy and celebration, bridegroom and bride, rejoicing, jubilation, pleasure and delight, love and brotherhood, peace and friendship. Pause real quick. We are so stupid. We take for granted the fact that we are able to be happy. We take for granted the fact that we know what pleasure is. We know what celebration is. We take for granted that we can have relationships that have this sense of fraternity and peace and love. And the 7th blessing is slapping us in the face saying, don't assume that this is automatic. This is a gift. God could have made you like an amoeba. You could have been walking around like a paramecium and just budding and having, extra genetic material spun off into the ooze. You are not only able to have this life and this awareness, but think of how you can celebrate it, what joy you can find in it. And really, for many people, from most of our history, the happiest day of their life would be their wedding day. It would be the day gastronomically when they would probably eat the best. It would be the day when they would be the center of attention from all of their community and celebrate it. It would be the day when they were opening up a new door on what it meant to be an adult. It would be the day when they would understand the potential for the depth and joy of the joy and depth of potential, the potential joy and depth, that's better English, the potential joy and depth of the relationship with another human being. And then after that, they would go through heartache and work and toil and stress and still have moments of joy and happiness. But for many people, it would be hard to compete with the wedding day. And so on this day of all days, we want people to understand that joy is a gift, even if it doesn't come as often as we might like. The blessing continues. May there soon be heard, Lord our God, in the cities of Judea and the streets of Jerusalem, the sound of joy and the sound of celebration, the voice of a bridegroom and the voice of a bride, the happy shouting of bridegrooms from their weddings and the young men from their feasts of song. So this is taking the particular joy of this bride and groom to use it as a metaphor based off the words of our prophets, that the ultimate sign of redemption will be heralded by the sound of young people rejoicing as they get married, that is the happiest noise we can imagine, and therefore we consider that to be the prelude to redemption for the world. And that means the Messianic era, the full redemption of the world. This is the metaphor we use, is the joy you feel today, that's what the whole world will get someday. And may it happen soon. And then we finish off, blessed are you, Lord, who makes the bridegroom and the bride rejoice together. So I mentioned number 6, that we finish with the bride makes the bridegroom and bride happy. Number 7, we finish with makes the bridegroom and bride rejoice together. Small grammatical difference, but very, very important. It's more stark in the English. I translated that to try and make it easy to spot. But in the Hebrew, it's just a slight change of preposition. The difference between each of them having a happiness that is their own, and that is number 6. And number 7, each of them finding a happiness that can only come by being together. That each of them should be happy and complete and full in themselves, but also each of them should recognize that there is a happiness that comes from the good relationship that only comes from the relationship and that can't be duplicated solo. That is not to say that everybody needs to get married. People can be very happy, fulfilled, and full people. Indeed, they should be, whether they're married or not. But there is a special blessing that comes from having had the good fortune to meet the right person to share a portion of your life with. And that is something that needs to be acknowledged. And that is the end of our Sheva Brachot. But it's not the end of the ceremony, at least by most traditions. If you've ever seen a Jewish wedding in a movie or a TV show, you always know it's a Jewish wedding because they show you none of the ceremony except the very end where somebody steps on a glass. It's nice. It's iconic. It's not legally binding. If you didn't have anything to step on, it's not a problem. If you step on something that isn't like the right thickness of glass or the right size of glass, it's not like an issue that we would have over the ring or the ketubah. You're still married. So why are we breaking this glass if it has no legal significance? Well, I just mentioned that this should be the happiest day of your life. This should be the day when you are feeling only joy and only gladness, and you are on top of the world. And if you are on top of the world, you're in charge of the world. And when you're in charge of the world, you should recognize that your happiness is not the only thing that matters, that the rest of the world still has problems. You may be feeling great today, and you should feel great today. You don't need to be like all glum on your wedding day. But you do need to dial it down from 10 to 9.5. And traditionally, glass was very expensive. And the breaking of the glass began at a party when the sage saw that people were neglecting even a shred of seriousness and consideration for the way the world was. And so it became custom to break the glass to remind us that, yes, we're happy and jubilant, but we cannot forget everything else. Now, over time, other traditions and interpretations have been added, and you'll hear lots of people explain it in many, many different ways. What I just gave you is the original explanation from the original story in the Talmud. But over time, people have given it other explanations, whether it be the destruction of the walls of Jerusalem, which is kind of in keeping with that theme, or whether it be the idea that your relationship should last longer than it would take for the shards of glass to be put back together, another popular one I've heard, all the way down to biological as being a euphemism for the intimacy that is about to occur, which will also create a breach within the woman, at least under the ideal circumstances in the eyes of the ancient world. So all of those are fine if you want to use as part of the meaning you can have from this act, but I did want to make sure you knew the original version. All right, and after that, you don't run off to the party. After that, you don't run off to the photographer. After that, you have what's called yichud. Yichud literally means together. And this is a time for the bride and groom to be alone after the ceremony and before joining the celebration. Now, we're all obligated to make them happy and to celebrate with them. And this is why you may see, like in Fiddler on the Roof, with the people dancing in front of the bride and groom, the whole bottles on the hat thing, all of that. Great. Whatever you can do to make the bride and groom happy and smile, go for it. But before all of that, the bride and groom need to be together. They need to actually have a few moments, a few minutes privately in their new status as husband and wife. It is, from my experience, something that couples have come back to me and said over and over was really a very meaningful and moving moment. Rather than rushing from the excitement of the ceremony into the excitement of the party, they actually will sit and be together, just hugging or holding each other or holding hands, whatever, just taking it in that they're married now, right? That whatever their relationship was before, and many people nowadays, of course, may live together or be dating for years and years and years, there is an emotional difference between that and being married and having gone through the rite and the ceremony. It's one of the reasons we have it. Remember, we saw way back when that before the Torah went, people just got together. The ceremony adds so much more, and it's good to take that in with your spouse before you are washed away in the celebration. But the celebration should be fun. That is great. In fact, it used to be the custom, and many people continue with this custom, to have a new party every day for 7 days, to have full 7 days worth of celebration. The next party doesn't have to be as big as the first, but it is nice to have new people so that we can recite the blessings again for their benefit if they weren't there at the first one. Many people don't do this because they run off on a honeymoon. You're still married if you don't, but it is a nice custom if you can find a way to make it work, and it doesn't have to be crazy expensive. It doesn't have to be like renting a venue. You can do a party each night in your house or apartment afterwards. All right. Now we get to the other side. And as I mentioned before, divorce is an important aspect of Jewish life because in some cases there are issues. The way the book of Deuteronomy explains it, a man takes a wife and possesses her. Again, this is not a commercial transaction. This is simply the idiom of Hebrew. She does not find favor in his eyes because he finds something appalling, bothersome, terrible about her. And he writes her a Sefer Kritut. A Sefer Kritut is a divorce document, a document of cutting. He hands it to her and sends her away from his house. She leaves his household and, should she find another person, becomes the wife of another man. However, the story goes on in Deuteronomy. This is not recommended, but this is to cover this eventuality. Then this later man rejects her, writes her a Sefer Kritut, hands it to her, and sends her away from his house, or the man who married her last dies. Then the first husband who divorced her shall not take her to wife again, since she has been defiled. That's a very bad word in English. It does not mean bad things in the Hebrew in this context. It just means that she has been intimate with another person, and that would be an abhorrent to Adonai. Basically, that last few sentences is trying to prevent legalized wife swapping. You can't divorce your wife, hand her over to someone else who marries her. He is with her, divorces her, hands her back to you. That's not allowed. Right? You're not allowed to put your divorce in Ketubah into a bowl and then pull it out and go home with that person. That doesn't work in Judaism. And so once you're divorced and once she has remarried, then it is impossible to remarry. If you haven't been remarried in the meantime, then yes, a divorced man can remarry his wife as long as she hasn't remarried in the meantime. But that first half is the one that's the most common issue, which is divorce. And you may notice it seems to be talking about finding something appalling with her, that there is a problem. What are the reasons for divorce? Well, this was a point of argument in the ancient world. Beit Shammai says, no man shall divorce his wife unless he found in her unchaste behavior. Right? He is interpreting this Deuteronomy 24 of saying because he found in her ervat davar as being only interpretable to mean unchaste behavior. However, Beit Hillel, the other academy, argued, even if she spoiled his food, because it said ervat davar, right? You can read the word ervat davar to mean something that was licentious or sexual, or you could read that was just being, it's a messed up thing. There's something wrong. Rabbi Akiva says, even if he found another woman prettier than her, as it is stated, if it happened that she did not find favor in his eyes, the second half of that sentence. Now, is Judaism saying that you can only divorce for issues of fidelity? No, because Beit Shammai loses this argument. They usually lose, I should let you know. Beit Hillel's position, saying that if he just doesn't like the way she cooks, he's allowed to divorce her. And Rabbi Akiva's additional idea that even if there's nothing wrong with her, just that he wants to marry someone else, that those are acceptable grounds for divorce. Now, does that mean those are good grounds for divorce? Does that mean that this should be your only reasoning for getting divorced? No, not at all. It does sometimes happen that a person will say, you know what, you ruined dinner, that's the last straw, and I'm getting a divorce. But usually the last straw isn't the first straw. Usually there were lots of other problems that were leading up to this. What Judaism is saying is that we, meaning either the rabbis or the people helping with the divorce, are not going to gatekeep the exit from the relationship. Yes, if someone comes to me and says they need to get a divorce, I will double check that they have gone through the normal process of finding out whether there is a way to salvage the relationship, a way to recapture whatever it was that brought them together in the first place and the commitment they had made. But if they say, look, you know what, we haven't done anything and we're not going to do anything, we just want to go to our separate ways because we're two separate people now, I'm not going to tell them, well, then I can't give you a divorce. I'll say, okay, if that is your decision, then that is your decision, and I'll make sure your divorce is official and proper in the eyes of Judaism. Because a regular civil divorce is not sufficient in and of itself. And we're going to get to that on the next slide. But before we jump to that, any questions on this part of reasons? And as you're thinking of questions, I'll just let you know, in case some of you look a little younger, so maybe you don't know, but there used to be laws in most states that you had to have a cause for divorce. It had to be someone's fault. And then you had to prove that in a court of law in order to get a divorce, and the opposite person could contest it. Judaism has never had that. So it's just, always surprising to me when we come across things in Judaism that we've been doing for 3,000 years that the US has only been doing since 1970. All right, not seeing any questions, so let's move on. So that Sefer Kritut, that book of, or that scroll or book of divorce, of separation, that is usually called a get, which causes no end of confusion in English because of the English word get. When you get divorced, you have to get a get. 3 times we say that sound in that word, that sentence, and it's really annoying. So a get is the term that we use for this. Now, this has to be handwritten for this person, for this purpose and this specific couple. You can't use a photocopied get. You can use a photocopied Ketubah and fill in the blanks for the names of the bride and groom and the dates. Nothing wrong with that. But for a get to get divorced, because we need to make sure that it is perfectly right and honest and valid and not a forgery, someone just erased the names and wrote in the other names and is pretending they got a divorce, but they actually haven't. It has to be done in this particular way. And that was an even bigger issue in the ancient world where forgeries might be a bit more of a common thing. So great care is needed, because if it were wrong, if the get was done wrong, then technically it wouldn't have been an actual divorce. And that means if they get remarried, they're committing adultery. So we work really, really hard to get this right. It's a very precise procedure. You have to do special training to be a sofer, to be a scribe, to write a get. It is a process of learning that's necessary. Now, this process begins with the husband, as we saw in Deuteronomy. However, in both the ancient world and the modern world, the wife could petition the Beit Din, the court, to convince him to give a divorce. And that would mean that the community will say, look, your wife is asking for a divorce, and especially in the modern world, you've already perhaps begun divorce proceedings in the civil court of law, because she's certainly allowed to do that under civil law. Therefore, for both of you to be officially divorced as a Jewish couple, we need to do the get. And we make it as painless as possible. It's about 5 minutes of the husband's time to authorize the get to be written, and then he doesn't have to do anything else. We try to make this as simple as possible to ensure that there is a proper Jewish divorce if necessary. As far as convincing goes, well, this is a topic that continues to come up. So if we look in the Mishnah, a get given under compulsion, that is to say, if forced by Jewish court, it is valid. Meaning if the rabbis get together and essentially coerce him to give a get, they can threaten to withhold any honors in the community. They can threaten that no one will talk to the person in the community, that he will never be allowed to do business in the community. And they can also take him in the back room and work him over until he is willing to give a divorce. That used to be our leverage. Now, we don't have that leverage anymore. I haven't been able to beat anyone up for this, but we can still try and force a person within our community. But the problem in the modern world, of course, is that many people who are refusing to do the right thing are leaving the community. They're not part of the community. So the fact that they can never come up on the bima and be called to the Torah, they don't really care. So the backup you might be thinking is, well, why not let the non-Jewish court do it? Indeed, there have been people who have argued that we should use special instruments, special documents written under American law that at the time of the wedding, that would say that if we get a divorce, that we are obligated to also get a Jewish divorce, and that would be enforceable by the American courts. We don't like that. Technically, as the Mishnah says, if the non-Jewish courts force them, then the get is not actually valid. Now, if the non-Jewish court says, hits him, beats him, and says, do what the Jewish court is telling you, then that is valid. And as was asked in the chat about the Lieberman clause, the conservative movement instituted a new phrase into the Ketubah that we use nowadays, and this is the Ketubot that I will use if I am conducting a wedding, that does try to walk this fine line of the second time. Now, We don't expect the U.S. courts to beat the wife, or to beat the husband to force him to give a get, but it does imply that the wife would be within her rights to appeal to the court to penalize the husband until he complied with the Jewish court's instructions to give her a divorce. So this is an attempt. It's come sort of back and forth of whether it will be upheld by American law, but it is at least putting in place a potential way to discourage husbands from refusing to give a get and thus keep their wives locked in Jewish marriage, even if a civil marriage or civil divorce has already been finalized. Because if either party have been married before and they have not had a get upon the end of their relationship, then a rabbi can't marry them. They cannot get married Jewishly. Even if they have a civil divorce, they can't get married Jewishly unless they have also had a get, if they've had a Jewish divorce. So we do a lot to try and make sure this happens. Now, I'm sure that at least some of you are thinking, but what if the husband, because he does have the authority to start this process, what if he really is just a complete stubborn jerk? Maybe that's why she's divorcing him. What if there's like nothing happening? Well, introduce you to the wall of text. So we do have one last nuclear option, the annulment of the wedding in the first place. So now we are in the Talmud again. Rav Nachman says the husband can void the get in front of two people. But since two people do not generate public awareness, it is possible that the wife doesn't hear and she will go and marry, and there are mamzerim, meaning illegitimate children. So he is worried. He says, wait a minute, if the husband has the get written and sends it to the wife, but after it's gone, he then turns to two other people and says, I'm canceling that get. You can't cancel it after it reaches her, but if he cancels it before it arrives, technically it would be nullified. But if he's only canceling it when two people are hearing, then that means she may not actually get word that he canceled it. And she gets the get thinking it's still valid. She gets remarried. She has children. Boom, we've got adultery and we have illegitimate children. This is a problem. And Rav Sheshet says, in front of three, meaning do it in front of three witnesses then. And this will generate public awareness so she does hear and know, and she would not marry. Thus, there is a need to institute this rule for the betterment of deserted wives, to not let women be trapped like this. The sages taught, however, that beyond this solution, if he nevertheless rendered it void, it is rendered void, right? This is technically true. And this is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says he is unable to render it void. And he also cannot add on to his condition, for if so, what power does the court have? So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, points out that actually we are allowed to say no, that we can undo what he does, that the court, the Beit Din, has the authority to do so. Now, the Talmud asks, as I'm sure you are as well, and is there anything that by Torah renders the bill of divorce void, and due to the reasoning of what power does the court have, we permit a married woman to marry another? Right, wait a minute. According to the Torah, if he announces in front of three guys that he is nullifying the divorce before it reaches her, then technically it's nullified. How can you say it isn't? Well, like this. Yes, we have that situation. Anyone who weds a woman weds her upon the conditional will of the sages. And when one fails to conform to their will in matters of marriage and divorce, the sages uproot his marriage from him retroactively. You may remember, let me scroll back, that when giving the token, he would say, behold, you are consecrated to me with this ring according to the law of Moses, that's the Torah, and Israel, that is the law of the land, meaning the law of the community. When he is getting married, he is subjecting himself to the rules of how to conduct a person both when being married and when getting a divorce. If he chooses to violate those rules, then the court can choose to nullify his marriage, because clearly he didn't mean it when he said he was getting married according to the rules of Moses and Israel. And if he didn't mean it, then it wasn't a real marriage in the first place. And if it wasn't a real marriage in the first place, then she doesn't need a divorce. She was never married to the jerk. And thus, boom, she is out of being trapped to this guy. So we do in the modern world use this rationale and this court proceeding when you have very extreme cases of a husband that is absolutely refusing to cooperate in any way, shape, or form, and we have no legal recourse to convince him otherwise. So this does happen a few times every so often to help women get out from underneath the burden of being married to a person Jewishly when they are completely separated under civil law, and when she wants to get remarried Jewishly, which may or may not be important to the husband anymore. So we do have solutions to all of these problems, and to make sure that everybody in the relationship is protected. All right, we've gone a little over time, but I know there may be questions. So if you've got questions, ask them now. All right, then. All right, everybody, take care and have a wonderful evening. And I will see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Shalom.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.